Welcome back. Vybz Kartel's conviction revived the long-standing debate we have been having here in Jamaica about the impact of dancehall on social behavior. Kartel, being the genre's most prolific influencer in the culture over the past 5 years, is the main target of those who argue that the music is a major contributor to the country's social decay. How then will the world boss's conviction impact the Jamaican pop culture as well as the wider society? That's the question we're exploring right now as we welcome Dr. Sonjah Stanley, Niaah, Senior Lecturer, Cultural Studies, UWI Mona campus, right now, right here on our stage. What a pleasure it is to have you, finally,
absolute
on our stage.
My pleasure to be here.
All right. Before we jump into you speaking about the social implications of this conviction, talk to me a little bit about this blog post of yours titled Cartel Conviction, the Exceptional World Boss and the Dilemma of Social Responsibility, in which you took issues with fellow lecturer Caroline Cooper, from an article she published last week about making a distinction between Vybz Kartel, the artist, and Adidja Palmer, the man.
So first of all, the article was inspired by my reading of Caroline's, her article in the Sunday Gleaner of last week, I think it was. And for me, it was an opportunity for me both to question what she was trying to put forward and for me to confess a number of things. Okay. I've not been a fan of Cartel. I didn't associate with the lecture at UWI, which was organized by Caroline Cooper. I have been very much on the side of articulating for social responsibility, especially on the part of those who are our major stars. And this is not about scapegoating now.
Yes.
This is not about putting all the work at the feet of our entertainers. This is about saying, in our social context, we need to be much more conscious about crime and violence, our social ills. And every time I've spoken, I think many of the times I've spoken, I've been very much on the side of talking about social responsibility. So in fact, the piece is entitled The Exceptional World Boss and the Dilemma of Social Responsibility.
You got very personal in this one.
Absolutely very personal, because that's how I am. I mean, I think as academics, we must be able to confess. We must be able to speak at the level of the personal if it is required. And so I use the opportunity then to speak about my own personal experience, my own personal conviction, but also then to question Professor Cooper and her assertion that the Jamaican public was not able to dissociate the whole business of the person, Adidja Palmer, from the persona, Vybz Kartel. And I find that interesting because that's a psychological argument.
Yes.
We've now stepped out of the realm of pop culture. Yes, there are persons and personas, but who is to say that Adidja Palmer did not get a fair trial, which was her questioning? She thought, well, I'm questioning whether it is Adidja Palmer is really innocent. She didn't question the evidence presented in court.
Yes.
And I think that to suggest that the evidence brought against Adidja Palmer, who is obviously the person in whatever evidence was put forward in the court, I think is a little dangerous, some people have articulated, and I tend to agree with them, because Adidja Palmer was the person being tried.
Yes.
No lyrics of Vybz Kartel was brought to bear in terms of the evidence in court.
Okay.
It wasn't Vybz Kartel in terms of his...
so are you saying the question is irrelevant then?
I'm saying I find the question at this point, when there has been a conviction with evidence brought forward, I find the question a little problematic, yes.
Yes. So what is the aim? What's the aim of this distinction between the artist, the Vybz, in a legal situation like this, What's the aim?
The distinction becomes important if there's a psychological problem. And if there's a psychological problem where an artist, for example, has bought into the hype and has begun to function on a daily basis as their persona, that means there's a certain level of narcissism, there is a certain level of displacement in terms of the person to begin to occupy the domain of the persona on a permanent basis. Now, that's a psychological issue. And I'm assuming that in a court of law, where these matters are to be taken up, there would have been a psychologist or a psychiatrist brought in to deal with issues like those.
So is there a tiff between you and Dr.
Absolutely
Cooper?
not. I have a lot of respect for Professor Cooper, and she knows this. I have a lot of respect for her. She and I have had our disagreements in the past in terms of academic concepts and approaches, but certainly not at a personal level.
So this
no,
would somewhat dispel the argument that the university is a garrison. I think it's Wilmot Perkins.
No, Wilmot Perkins says of the university that's an intellectual ghetto. But you would have had perhaps personal knowledge of me never in the context of any cascas in the media, and certainly not trying to bring the university into any disrepute.
Okay. All right, that's it. All right, so we have that to explore with Dr. Cooper. So let's now talk, let's see if we can talk a little bit about the social impact of this conviction. Or perhaps you could talk a little bit, first of all, about your own position. Because clearly you're no fan of Vybz Kartel. So why do you take such a hard line against him even before all of this?
I don't take a hard line against Vybz Kartel. My spirit just never take him.
Okay.
That's a simple matter now. That's something that's, for me, it is at a metaphysical level. And I don't generally speak as an academic in those terms in public, but I think it's a part of the confession. My spirit never take Kartel from morning.
Okay.
And if you come into the public domain to my attention, not only through your music, but through questions in relation to your role as a model citizen, your role as an influencer, and their negative things being brought to bear in that kind of commentary, if that is the attention I'm getting from you in terms of your own position, I mean, there were questions being raised about whether he's a role model or not, and he would say, I'm not a role model, I'm not taking responsibility for all of that. And I remember remarking about the fact that if I was ever his mother, I would give him a spanking.
Okay.
Because at some level, you must understand that you are a great influencer.
Okay.
And so, you
can't walk away from that.
You can't walk away from that. This is my issue. And so I think Kartel, being such a bright man, he's credited for his lyrical potency. You're so bright, and yet at the same time so dense, because you could have been such a positive influence for many.
Okay. Hence your position.
Hence my position.
You abstain from any
comments
publicly about him personally and his music and so on.
I have abstained from commenting, but I certainly am a fan of some of his music.
Of course. Yes. That is clear in your blog. Your blog.
Turn and Wine is one
where
of
can
my
people
favorites.
find your blog, by the way?
Dancehall Geographies.
Okay, because
WordPress.com.
I want our viewers to go and check it out, because you're saying a lot in there, a whole lot, more than we can discuss right here on stage. So let's talk now a little bit about the social implications of this conviction. So
for me, the assertion that dancehall has been in prison because of Kartel's incarceration is really problematic. It is a diss to some of the artists who have been out here working their butts off, producing music, even though people like Mark Wignall will tell you dancehall, as we see today, is not music. They know nothing about music, strictly speaking. And I disagree with that kind of assertion. Music is always evolving. But the whole idea that this conviction is going to affect dancehall music in some way or affect the social context is for me a little... is an overstatement. It's ridiculous, because we have seen in the past year or two in particular the emergence on the world stage, not just a local stage. I was on the festival scene last summer and saw all of the persons credited as being a part of this reggae revival, certainly on the international scene.
Yes.
And they're not only performing in terms of reggae, strictly speaking, but dance hall, absolutely.
Is injected in there as well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I don't make such a great distinction between reggae and dancehall anymore, because as I tell people, if you're looking historically, dancehall in terms of its vocal aesthetic qualities, it was there long before. If you talk about U-Roy, Kingston, Count Matuke, and all of these early DJs, the aesthetic was there before. And
before the
then
1980s,
reggae,
when it exploded into mainstream.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So that I think that the genre will continue to emerge in the way that it has been emerging. What we now need is a focus on quality music.
Okay.
This has been a part of what has been compromised. Quality music, and I am talking about not just things being produced on a laptop, properly mastered, great collaborations. So certainly the social message being injected in there. It can't just be about girls, cars, and guns.
So you think that this will influence artists?
To certainly rise to the occasion?
Motivate them to rise?
Absolutely.
Because some of the time the disputes and the rivalry are used to distract from performance.
Absolutely.
And delivering quality music to get the hype, people get into rivalry.
Yes.
And use that to grow their career. So with that out of the way and people getting, and Cartel facing the ultimate conviction, you are projecting that we will see a return to music, to a focus to producing
Absolutely,
good
because
music?
I think there are many artists now trying to check themselves.
Yes.
Really saying to themselves, can I make a positive contribution? At least that is what I want the artists to be doing. Let me just say that. I would love for our artists to be saying to themselves, how can I make a positive contribution and bring this a little further? Know the history of your music. I tell my students all the time in the classroom, know about your culture before you know about anybody else's culture. Do the historical work. Learn enough so that you can become a master of what it is you do here and be able to share that with the rest of the world. I tell people all the time, Jamaica is the center of the universe. What we have to do is to really appreciate and love what we do so that the positive can be injected into everything. I mean, and I'm not saying we return to a fundamentalist sort of originary discourse about reggae and its one love message and all of that, because music evolves, messages evolve. I'm saying, though, that the overwhelming influence has got to be positive. It cannot just be about guns and girls.
And what help would they want from the wider society, from leadership? What blame do we ascribe to the products of dancehall, the output of dancehall, to leadership in this country? Do you ascribe any blame to leadership, to the political establishment? Certainly,
and let me inject right away that when I talk about leadership in that context, I'm not talking only about politicians or the political structure. I'm talking also about the University of the West Indies. One of the statements made by the principal of the Mona campus recently is that we as a university have not done enough to really foster national growth and development.
Okay.
And so one of the things we have to do is to provide the data necessary, do the research. When people talk about reggae, when people talk about dancehall, where are the numbers? Where is the research? And so I'm definitely a part of this movement. And you might have heard, one of the things we did recently was to stage a State of the Music Symposium in collaboration with JamPro and Jaria. And so that was very positive. People turned out. We are trying to bridge the gap between the researchers, the policymakers, and the industry insiders. So that's critical. And leadership is implicated there because we need resources. We need a facilitating government. We need an enabling environment in order to have all the sectors working together, not just duplication of effort. And every change of government, we have a new emphasis on whether it's creative industries or something else.
Because the wider picture, the primary objective is to lower, to mitigate the demand for poisonous, toxic music, as some people call it. Isn't that? Shouldn't that be? To lower the demand in our population, among our youth, for this kind of output.
And we must do that by giving them what is positive music. And so the media is implicated.
Of course.
What are we playing on our airwaves? When we can be a DJ in a segment playing 13 songs from one artist, what are we saying about the music that's produced by other people? And I'm not making any statements about payola. Payola is seen to be a problem by some people, but we must be able to get everyone on board in what I'm calling a campaign to better the state of our music in Jamaica.
Okay. Wow. Well said. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And you know, this question is going to continue because when we come back right here on stage, we're going to have sitting with us a man who is a leading voice in the mainstream U.S. music market. And later, a man who is the leading voice and producer in the Canadian reggae dancehall hip-hop space. Stay with us. We'll be back.
Mr. Cartel flavors you can't deny. Cause them circle cats rap so fly. Them tracks stay do or die and ask.